The presenter is going to be Dr. Donald Tuck, professor here in the Department of Philosophy and Religion. Dr. Tuck is a specialist in the religions of East Asia, and most of his research time, I guess, in earlier years anyway, was spent in India. But since he has been able to do field research in the Republic of China, and then most recently during his period as a visiting professor in Japan, I'm sure on the side was doing research there as well. So Dr. Tuck has a lot of good field-based research experience that gives him a good background to address the topic of Buddhism in Japan for us today. So Dr. Tuck, I'll turn it over to you, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you. Contemporary Japan presents to the interested observer a nation of religiously pluralistic people. According to the 1984 Religious Yearbook, published by the Agency of Cultural Affairs, over 116 million people identified themselves as Shinto adherents. More than 87 million persons follow the Buddhist tradition. Approximately 14 million practice a religion drawing upon both of these traditions, while less than 1.5 million affiliate with the Roman Catholic or Protestant Christian tradition. Now, the total population of Japan has reached the 120 million mark, which means that the people do not adhere to their religion as mutually exclusive social institutions. Quite different, I think, from the Western pattern. Some recent opinion polls, based primarily upon structured belief systems, suggest a lack of ideological commitment to these traditional Japanese religions. However, the majority of them place more emphasis upon the practices of religion than to differing thought structures, which have in the past divided them into mutually exclusive units of Japanese human culture. The people practice what I call multiple religious affiliation, by which we mean that we find religious identity in practical activities understood in a Japanese way as coordinate aspects of the ultimate expression of human culture. That's how I define religion. Some people celebrate the major event of the life cycle expressing Shinto forms, while other involvements reflect their interpretations of the Buddhist traditions. More disciplined practice draw upon contributions from both of these religions, but redefine and work them into specialized expression which seems similar to, but projects a norm most often quite different from the original sources. Furthermore, scholars have identified the influences of Chinese as well as indigenous religions upon the developing forms of Japanese religions. Today I would like to, with that introduction to Japanese religions, I'd like to address Jodo Shinshu. From August 1990 until June 1991, my wife and I went to Japan, where I taught at Kansai University of Foreign Studies, conducted research on the interdependencies of religion and culture. I studied one of the major schools of the Buddhist tradition, the Jodo Shinshu, or the Pure Land School, interpretations of Japanese Buddhism. My research focused upon Nishi Honganji, the West Temple of the original vow. This lecture will present Jodo Shinshu according to that one school of the 10 schools of Jodo Shinshu, the Nishi Honganji. Popular name, I think, for what is commonly called the Honpa Honganji School, has its headquarters in Kyoto, where I spent quite a bit of that year. I have sketched out 3 sections of the lecture. The first part, I will talk about selected aspects of Jodo Shinshu. The second part, I will turn to some slides. And then third, I will open it to questions that you might have, and hopefully I can answer them. First, selected aspects then of Jodo Shinshu, the largest Buddhist school of the tradition. The founder, or the Japanese patriarch, the founder in Japan that is, was none other than Shinran, who lived in the 12th and the 13th century, and who wrote many works, the most important and the largest of which is the Kyoto Shinshu. Now, I'd like to turn to one of the aspects, the Jodo Shinshu beliefs. Jodo Shinshu teaches the easy path by emphasizing the other power, or tariki, and that tariki is open to all individuals. Especially do they emphasize open to the common man. Now, there was a debate between the Tariki school and the Jiriki school about this, whether one relies upon the other power or the self-power. The Jodo Shinshu chose the other power. That sets them then against the path of the sages, or self-power, which they conceive as the difficult path only for the elite, commonly called Zen. So this is a school that is quite different and quite opposite to the Zen tradition. Turning then to an explanation of the other power, they emphasize Amidah. Out of the many Buddhas of the Mahayana tradition, they have chosen the Buddha of light and life. He started out as a human being, followed the vow of the Bodhisattva, and then became enlightened. Now, he said that he would become enlightened and return to help human beings if he would fulfill 48 vows. I can't go into all of the 48, but I will emphasize the 18th. The 18th vow sets him up as the Bodhisattva of wisdom and compassion. He is the one who, having experienced enlightenment, will come back to the human world, help human beings out of suffering, so that they too will go with him to the Pure Land, or the Western Paradise. Now, the key vow, or the original vow, the West Temple of the original vow I've written on the board, is the 18th, that reads in translation something like this. Any human being who experiences shinjin, I translate it, dependency upon the other power, and recites Amidah's name, will unfailingly attain birth in the Pure Land of enlightenment. Notice, very simple, very easy, correlated to the common man in the Kamakura period, that period of chaos in Japanese history. Now, having established Amidah as the other power, then they teach that Amidah transfers his merit toward other people. Now, you have heard in the Buddhist tradition, inherited and modified out of the Hindu tradition, of karma. What they believe is that Amidah, having fulfilled that vow and become the Buddha of light and life, cancels karma and offers enlightenment to the Pure Land, to all of those who take refuge in him as the ultimate power, or the other power. Having established then the other power and that transfer of merit from Amidah to human beings, then we enter into a large debated area called the two phases of the religious quest and the religious experience. The first phase is called the phase of going to Amidah. It's a very imaginative conception, and the idea is that one will express reliance upon the Amidah, and through his power, that other power, ultimately then go to the Pure Land, at which either he will stay there in the Pure Land, a very common idea for the common man, or will, by Amidah's help, experience non-duality, or the emptiness of the Buddhist tradition. Now, there's a debate there. I can't go into that today. The common man can understand things very creatively, and so therefore, and simplistically, so therefore the Pure Land is a place for them to go. The idea of the scholars is that once they are there, Amidah then will open their mind to the enlightenment experience. That then will go beyond subject and object, one then will experience the emptiness that is talked about in the Indian Buddhist texts. Well, okay, what does it involve to go to Amidah? Humans recite a simple statement: I take refuge in Amidah, called the Nembuts. Once they say that, then they are expressing this reliance on the Buddha, and after a life has been spent in doing this, then they will experience enlightenment. Enlightenment now. After death, they will go to the Pure Land. The scholars continue to stress that the saying of the Nembutsu is not a work. It is an expression of gratitude. In other words, when they say, I take refuge in Amidah, and Amidah gives them then that transfer of merit, then they respond to Amidah with gratitude. It is neither a merit nor a work. Highly emphasized in Shinran's major work, the Jodo Shinshu. So, the human beings then realize and accept this reliance upon Amidah. This reliance in its simple formulation then removes ignorance, the major problem of the Buddhist tradition, and one then enters into what is called the rightly established state. Having experienced that, then they have the assurance that after death they will then arrive at the Pure Land, ultimately go to nirvana and emptiness, and that is usually called the going to Amidah. Now, the other phase is the phase of coming to the world of suffering human beings. Among the human beings, they practice faith by benefiting others, or shinjin. I slipped on faith. They practice reliance upon Amidah by benefiting others. In other words, they come to the defiled world to help human beings through any of the sufferings that they have. And then with this transfer of merit, they too, acting like Amidah, transfer that merit, and like Amidah, they help that person experience the Pure Land. Now, the structure of the belief goes on and on. I've at least selected a couple of these ideas so that you're aware of that. Since Japanese religion emphasizes practice more than a systematic structure of belief, I want to show how the Jodo Shinshu differ from other Buddhists and the religions of Japan. Certainly they differ from the Tendai, Shingon, and Zen of the Buddhist tradition, and of course differ from the major tradition of Japan, the Shinto. Jodo Shinshu has tried to do away with the distinction between ordained clergy, if you will, and the lay people. They have a number of ordination. A lay person can undergo a lower level of ordination, and then if he continues to work and he is qualified to lead, then he will undergo a second ordination to become a leader. But what's interesting, not only that he tries to do away with that hierarchical distinction between the ordained leadership and the common layman, but starting with Shinran's teacher, Honen, the people of the Jodo Shinshu marry. That is, they marry, have children, are working in the world just like you and I do. And the idea is that they want to show that the merit of Amidah, accomplished in his 48 vows, is so powerful that it can help even one who have children. Now, Shinran married several wives, and he had a large number of children, lived in poverty, and so therefore I think he's a good example of Amidah's power to help those who have problems with their children and the like. That sets them apart. One of the reasons why Honen wanted them to marry, wanted the followers to marry, and then told Shinran how to marry and arrange those, was because of the rather strange sexual practices that were going on at Mount Hiei. He had studied at Mount Hiei. He rejected those kinds of sexual practices, then told Shinran to marry, and as I said, he married and had lots of children. The second point of the practices that differentiate the Jodo Shinshu from other Buddhists is that they do eat meat and they do drink wine and beer. Those restrictions have been removed. And the idea, if you were to ask them, they would say, we're Mahayana, we refer to the Lotus Sutra and the commentaries. It's not a matter of what you eat and what you drink, it is a matter of your reliance upon Amidah. Now, the third practice that I want to talk about is that they condemn the austere asceticism of the mountain religion, sometimes called Shugendo. They see these actions as miraculous and magic, and they call it superstition. Those are rejected in the light of Amidah's 48 vows and the transfer of merit, the idea of assurance to then go to the Pure Land. The fourth idea that I want to develop in the, or at least to suggest in the practice is the joy at the temple celebrations. The humanities have flowered under the Jodo Shinshu as it has among most of the Mahayana. I will show you later in the slides that at their major temple, the headquarters office, they have 2 no plays outside and 1 in. No plays are annually presented at the temple, and the people come, laugh through the problems of the Buddhist monks. Some of you who have read the no plays know that many of the major characters are fumbling Buddhist monks who get in all kinds of trouble, and then Amidah, of course, comes, saves them out of their problems, straightens them out, and with a disciplined life they get to the Pure Land. Also, you have a great deal of expression of musical composition and lyrics, the poems, the gathas, the hymns of Shinran and followers have been put to music. When you go in the temples, you will see quite a number of flower arrangements. Many of these people who have followed the Jodo Shinshu are former farmers. They used to be poor, but now have become rich, and they have become flower dealers, and so therefore every year you have flower arrangement contests entered into with quite a lot of joy and excitement. Also, the tea ceremony, the last of which I will mention. I will show you in the slides the Flying Cloud Pavilion. Whenever they have a serious celebration, they will then have the people come in, serve tea, and the tea then is to help them to concentrate their mind upon Amidah, the Pure Land, and the accomplishment of that religious experience. The third aspect of the Jodo Shinshu that I want to just suggest is to point out that symbolically you have many images of the Amidah, especially in the headquarters office, but in all of the temples and in the homes. Now remember, this is correlated to the common people, so therefore one does not need an image. All he needs is a scroll with the name of I Take Refuge in Amidah. But many of them, with the greater wealth of Japan, have an altar at home in which they have an image of the Amidah. What I want to emphasize is that the image of Amidah is standing. He is making a gesture of walking toward the people, and if you look at the side of it, he is leaning out toward the people. The idea is, not only did he experience the vow, but he has come back to help others, has the power to work within them, transferring their life from suffering to the acceptance of joyful life. The images of Amidah then are one of the major symbols of the religious tradition. Now, the lineage of the Pure Land goes all the way back to India, and they will talk about the patriarchs of India, then the transference of the tradition to China, and then finally the patriarchs of the Pure Land tradition in Japan, the first of which is none other than Shinran, but 20 or more following him, so that we have right up to the present leadership these patriarchs of the Pure Land tradition. The third symbol is the Nembuts itself. The Nembuts is a Japanese phrase, the spoken word of truth. So the truth is not some abstraction, but symbolically, by use of words, they then will express this. And this expression of I take refuge in Amidah, the Buddha of light and life, they are then symbolically showing their allegiance to and affiliation with the school of the Jodo Shinshu. So we've suggested some beliefs, some practices, some symbols, and I want to talk for a short time about the social organization of the Pure Land School. It is a hereditary leadership going all the way back to Shinran. As a matter of fact, the head of the organization, the Monshu that I've written on the board, must be a relative of the Shinran family. And all of these 24 go back to that tradition. Now you can understand why the marriage is so important, because it affects then the social organization of hereditary leadership. Assisting him in the decisions that he makes are a group of advisors. And these are chosen by the Monshu himself. They come from two categories: men of great practice, as I've tried to emphasize earlier, and then also men of scholarship. They have several universities and a whole educational system. Their intellectuals are of, I think, a very high caliber, and you always have debates between the men of practice and the men of scholarly attainment. It's an ongoing problem. Jodo Shinshu, like many religions, has it. Now, one of the major points that I addressed when I was there was the social problems confronting the Jodo Shinshu today, the ethical applications of this belief, practice, symbols, and social institution. The first issue to which I turned was racial prejudice. The Japanese have among them a group of people called the Burakumin. These are Japanese, but earlier, a couple centuries ago, they were categorized as unclean. Unclean because of the occupations which they did and performed, because they handled slaughter and blood and those kinds of things. Now, that is a very Japanese racial prejudice, one of the many, against these Japanese called the Burakumin. What interested me was that 90% of the Burakumin religious affiliated people associate with the Jodo Shinshu. So therefore, I tried to ask these people in my survival level Japanese and through translators what they were doing about the cases of racial prejudice. Now, interestingly enough, the emperor has set up a committee to handle all of the cases where there is some kind of problem with racial prejudice. And he very wisely, it seems to me, put as the head of that committee the current Monshu of the Jodo Shinshu. They are in the process of collecting those cases. Those cases then will go not only before the imperial courts, but because it affects so much the Jodo Shinshu and the ethical issues there, those are being studied. I would like to return to Japan with better facility in the language to follow that one out. A second problem that I tried to look at while studying them was to ask and critically examine the close relationship between Jodo Shinshu and the imperial family. In the 16th century, Jodo Shinshu rivaled the imperial family in clout, economics, and the rest. And so therefore, as a way of handling that rival, it seems a way very well used in Japan, the imperial family intermarried with the Jodo Shinshu people. What I found was there is a reluctance to criticize the Shinto religion and the imperial family because they are connected by marriage. I tried to press that. Is there a reluctance only to criticize the state Shinto? Why not the shrine Shinto? And each time I found that I came to an impasse and I had to do more work. There is this reluctance to critically examine and to critically confront the imperial family. Another problem that arises out of that is that there is a reluctance among the Jodo Shinshu to enter into the political arena either as candidates or to use the voting bloc as a clout to criticize the policies of the political regime. Well, I was interested in that. Those are continuing some of my interests. The third issue that I looked at was birth control and abortion. And I talked to some of the major teachers at their university. And what I found was there is a lack of overall guidelines for the organization. Now, those of you who have tried to study Japan realize that that's not the only issue, religion that is, that you will find this. There is a great stress upon individual cases and in the ideas about birth control and abortion to examine those, interestingly enough, so that the result of which is for the good of all of those involved. Well, stay tuned. I would like to get back to that. There are others who are looking into that. There is no law against birth control, and abortion, as you know, in Japan is used quite widespread as a means of birth control. The last item I had was I tried to look at the psychological problems, particularly within the Jodo Shinshu. As you know, Japan has gone through tremendous change from a rural to an urban civilization, and they, of course, would then face much stress in the modern period. I looked at two psychotherapy systems, the Morita system, trying to treat neuroses, and a Japanese word called nervosity, if I can bring that out as a strange English word. In other words, the Japanese have an excessive introversion complex, and so therefore this kind of psychotherapy tries to bring them out of their introversion. They also are confronted with compulsiveness as a result of that, perhaps, to overcome. And I think that element has received Western interest. Coupled with that introversion and compulsiveness is a self-repulsion. Now, the reason why Jodo Shinshu is interested in this is because it is a religious concern. Such things as self-repulsion should lose itself in the reliance upon Amidah. The compulsiveness would be disciplined toward the right ends, and this introversion would come out of that and emphasize the communal relationships in the Jodo Shinshu community. The other one is the Nikon Psychotherapy. This is a very Buddhist psychotherapy, and it emphasizes elements that are very, very close to the Jodo Shinshu religion. See if you follow what I'm saying. They stress the interdependency of individuals upon other persons. Having known that, then, they stress that one should repay the debt that they owe to other people. So therefore, in the Nikon Psychotherapy, that will go on for a short period of time or longer, they spend the time reevaluating one's self-image and then working with that debt to others, changing that debt to a kind of constructive force that would help other people, and then end up with the idea of gratitude and humility. You can see where that kind of psychotherapy really comes out of the Buddhist tradition. and I tried to press this. Many of my informants knew about it. Others were reluctant to talk about it, but I had read that material, and I think that's available in English. Well, that then is a selected view at the Jodo Shinshu, one of the 10 schools of the Pure Land, the, I think, major Buddhist tradition in Japan. Now, the second thing I want to do is to take a time where I will draw from my collection of slides and take you to the complex of the Nishi Hongwanji, rattle around there for a while, and show you some of the things by pictures about which I have spoken in this first part of it. So if we can have the lights off, and John, I think you're going to have to move. Yes, if you would, please. Can everybody see? Just about every important city in Japan now has a tower. So I climbed the tower and took this picture from the Kyoto Tower. And it shows the Jodo Shinshu, the West Temple complex. Don't think of it as one temple. This is one of the sections. Then they have a campus outside of the city. But it stretches all the way from up here, filled with buildings down through here. The university, the Ducoco University, sits down here, and a lot of the priests, etc., live in this area. What we in the West should call a temple complex of multiple services, administrative positions, and the like. I climbed a business building across from it to get this picture early in the morning. You've hit the fog, and you can see that it is really right on one of the major thoroughfares in Kyoto, and that was built by the United States Armed Forces as a fire break, and taking a lot of Jodo Shinshu land and the like. You enter into this complex through the many gates, through the wall, and you come into the many buildings therein. Two of the major buildings, the building which houses the image of Amidah that I discussed, and then also the founder, Shinran's image. Most of the very important rites and celebrations will occur here, and then the normal ones there. Before I leave this picture, I want to show you this library. They have one of the copies of the Tripitaka, the major teachings of the Buddha, on their property, so that although they claim to correlate the religion to the common people, they are of the middle class, upper class, and because of the farmers, some of the very wealthy. They have many restaurants on the complex, and I could not afford the one where the ladies come in with their Paris and Italian fashions. So although they say it is for the common man, it is for all men, let's put it that way. Many of the buildings, they're into high school and kindergarten and the like, those buildings here. And then administrative building behind this, a huge building that handles the worldwide outreach of the Jodo Shinshu. Show you across this fire break and one of the main gates, the gate that I always used, and some of the finest wooden temples in Japan. Not the largest, one of their sister schools has the largest of the Jodo Shinshu wooden buildings. This is where I spent much of my time observing the rites and the like. As I said to you, they are farmers, and they have chrysanthemum contests, and that was going on during this picture. And you have the open gate, the open area in the foreground here with the lamps of the light, and you get the symbolism of all of that. What goes on is inside, and that's where they express their the Nembuts toward the Amidah. They were one of the earliest of the religions to open themselves to Western scholarship and to see Western models as over against theirs. They knew the difference, and they continued to point that out. But here you have the earliest building of Ducoco University. The people themselves would like to get rid of it, but it has become a national landmark, and Kyoto City has asked them to keep it. No one uses it. It's quite decrepit, but I thought you might be interested to see that. Whereas I could show you some of the buildings, the dormitories for males and female students, as they come to Ducoco University. Now, Ducoco University does not rate with, say, Tokyo or the imperial universities, but I suppose on the third level of universities, Ducoco University would certainly fit there. On the other hand, they have translation committees and bureaus where they are trying to bring all of the Chinese and Japanese material to the Jodo Shinshu, so it is academically studied and interpreted. What interested me, because I had done some earlier work on the American branch, was that they have a building of the Buddhist Churches of America. They also have a translation series that has come out, and their task then, under the aegis of the administration of the Jodo Shinshu hierarchy, is to bring all of the writings of Shinran into English. Then when they have done that, then they will work on the other writings of the other Monshu, and then finally bring in the Chinese materials. The wealth of the temple and the position that they hold within the community of the Japanese society is certainly demonstrated by the national treasures that that the government has deposited in the Hongwanji headquarters area. Here you have the Chinese gate, very, I think, beautiful and priceless gem, bringing you closer to it. In fact, I would like to take you even closer, those of you who know about the ox herding stories, the 10 pictures. Here you have this carved in wood, deep relief on both sides. And I think you will agree with me that that is not only a national treasure, but quite a precious treasure of Japan, and especially under the protection of the Jodo Shinshu. Other buildings from the historical past have moved. They have moved them into this area. Here are 3 buildings in which you have not only paintings and drawings, ceilings and the like, but precious artifacts of the Japanese history. When you go into this area, and you must receive permission, though it's easily to get if you are patient, you come to the Japanese garden. Now, this is a dry garden. It is not natural, because the world in which we live is naturally suffering, and so therefore one must go beyond suffering to the pure land. And it is constructed in such a way that you see water and trees and flowers and beauty. All of those remind one of the aspiration to the pure land. What interested me most of this was what they call borrowed landscape. It's an idea from Chinese landscape paintings. You can see that they've used the top of one of the buildings there as the representation or symbol of the mountain. And then down here is the world of suffering through which we must pass with the help of Amidah and then go to the pure land. Some of the finest gardens are found among the Jodo Shinshu people. When I say some of the finest, I don't want to run into arguments of which is the best. I think they're all very nice, frankly. When you go into this area, you realize that it just goes on and on, rooms and rooms. You come into the major area, and you see the tatami mats, the paintings, priceless paintings by Chinese painters, done in perspective for the viewer. Just in case you wonder, why these Confucian Taoist paintings are found within the Buddhist tradition. Shinran and others of his followers said that we know who it is upon whom we rely. That does not mean then that we have to go and attack other people. So therefore they subjugate them into a lesser concern, and then beyond those are the ultimate concern of the Jodo Shinshu and Amidah. Beautifully done, I think you will agree. As you come closer to the front, you can get a closer look of this. You can see the carving that is done here. And I draw your attention to the red tassels. When this was used by the emperor, the crack guard, which constantly guarded him, was always found close by, so that if anyone came near this, they would know it, and they would come out to protect the emperor from enemies. Many of the rooms have priceless, not only paintings, but fauna and flora of the day, so that we know what was growing about that time. Here are some of the paintings, priceless treasures of the national treasures. Wanted to show you one of the ceilings called the fan room, giving you an idea of the importance of that. I happen to like to carve. I don't do it very well, but I like carving. And a friend of mine helped me to get this out of one of the books on the many art books of the Jodo Shinshu. And it shows you the, really the presentation of the Pure Land. It's a beautiful land, appealing, and the fulfillment of all one's senses before one then goes on to non-duality and emptiness. So that is there, with the symbols of the geese, of long life, and other of the flora. You can always tell where the emperor resided, because I was told by the corbelled molding there. So this was the place where the emperor lived, where he received his private audiences, and it is really a place where he would then study, practice his calligraphy, do the affairs of state, and lead the nation as the manifestation of Kami. Here again, it's a very tolerant and open society. Again, one worships Amidah and then subjugates the others in a hierarchy. I mentioned about the no plays. We went to a couple of these. We had read the plays beforehand, and then we came and watched the production by some of the fine groups in Kyoto. They have three no stages there. The one I showed you, you go in and the tatami mats are there. You just remove certain pillars, and then that becomes a no stage. Then this one outside, and then finally the one on the left is where they performed the no play that I watched. And you have to have tickets to get in because it's sold out long beforehand. A friend of mine gave us tickets to go, and we went, and of course the subject was a bumbling priest who couldn't find his way through the world of suffering, needed Amidah's help, and then through the expression of the Nembutsu became enlightened. Just to show you a few of the pictures there. When you go to Kyoto, you will hear about the Golden Pavilion and the Silver Pavilion. And if you like those, then go to those. One I think that rivals them in simplicity and beauty is none other than the Flying Cloud Pavilion. This was found on an island. It was moved here by the imperial government, and now it belongs to the Jodo Shinshu. During one of their celebrations, we celebrated the tea ceremony here. And of course, accompanied with the flowers, the flower arrangement, and the other arts and humanities. The emperor liked to go by ship, by small boat, across the water, and then into this pavilion where he stayed with his family. The Buddhists like it because of their idea of following the vehicle, either of the smaller vehicle or of the larger vehicle, across the water and then reaching nirvana. And they will continue to explain that to you. I happen to like it. The Buddhists were one of the earlier groups to take bathing from just the imperial and the elite down to the common man. And so what you see here is an expression of the bathhouse that is used, and then beside that is a tea house, getting you to understand purity and pollution, then also the idea of tea as a means to understand and practice the way to enlightenment. The last part, I want to take you to one of the most important festivals. It was the anniversary celebration of Kenyo, one of the earlier Monshu, and this occurred in the year when I was there. Like good Japanese, they all make reservation. They come from all of the temples all over the provinces and areas of Japan. Then when they get there, they line up and they are brought into the interior of the temple temple itself. Being modern people and rather wealthy, in order for everyone to hear and to see, 45 large TVs were set up so that everything that was occurring at the altar would be heard and seen very carefully. On the television, you have the current 24th Monshu presiding. The celebration is very colorful. Here you have the colorful gowns. Notice the men and the women. The women are not supposed to be inferior to the men in this religion, and so therefore from the women's organizations they then march in with this procession. Not only that, but followed after them are the other major leaders of provincial or larger temples. They all march in with the accompaniment of ancient Chinese and Japanese music. Again, highly developed by the Japanese Jodo Shinshu people. The robes are not supposed to show favor. They are only to indicate one's position, so they say. Here you have some of the ancient Chinese pipe organs, mouth organs, and the like, accompanying the people as they come in. And then, of course, you get to the hierarchy of the administrative positions, and then finally the former Monshu, the father of the present patriarch, who in typical Japanese society and here too is honored for his contribution to the Jodo Shinshu religion. And to give you an idea of how packed we were in there, I'm finished with the slides, and I'd like to turn, if we can turn the lights on, to some questions, if you have them. But just to remind you that when I went to this celebration, it was very cold. Of course, I was freezing, and I found out these chemical heaters. They're wonderful things. So as I sat there shivering, some of the people who had befriended me, and they will, slipped those into my hand, and I had one in each hand and one in each pocket, and I stayed warm. That helped me to not only observe the celebration that was going on, but to also stay warm during it. Well, okay, any questions or comments that you might have that I can handle? Yes.